talk today is titled That's My Jam, and I'm going to be talking about using Google Jamboard for UX mapping, design sprints, and collaboration in higher ed. This is my third time speaking at PSE Web, but for those who are meeting me for the first time, I thought I'd start by telling you just a little bit about who I am. So I've worked at Western University for over 8 years in management and communications roles in arts and humanities, visual arts, and the Department of Communication and Public Affairs. And I'm also an instructor at continuing studies where I teach grant writing, digital storytelling, and public relations. And I also just completed my first year in my Master's of Digital Experience Innovation at the University of Waterloo. So what this means is that I have the privilege of wearing many hats. As a communications staff member, as an instructor, as a course developer, and now also as a grad student, which is really great because it's given me the opportunity to experience firsthand what 3 of my main stakeholder groups are also experiencing. And while I'm a firm believer in the statement, "You are not your audience," sometimes finding myself in each one of these groups has given me the opportunity to experience all of these worlds firsthand and empathize with each one of them. In each one of these roles, one of my favorite tools, hands down across the board, has been the Post-it. So why do I love Post-it so much? Well, they're cheap, they're accessible, they're democratic, and transformative. I've written down that I need to swing by the store and pick up some almond milk after work, or I've used them as the starting point for a wide-reaching strategy and projects that have led to change throughout my university. Anyone who's ever taken part in a really well-facilitated design sprint or organizational planning session knows that these cheap yellow squares can be the start of big things. They can be the basis for important words, or they can be crumpled up and thrown out. They're disposable, so you can write down silly, outside-of-the-box ideas you wouldn't feel comfortable writing in your fancy moleskin. My undergraduate degree is actually in fine arts, and we had a professor that insisted that we use cheap, disposable newsprint because he felt drawings we made on those type of disposable materials we wouldn't consider as precious, right? So we would be okay to experiment, to innovate, to try interesting things that we wouldn't have the guts to do on expensive paper. Post-its are tactile, they're instant, they're low stakes, and they're filled with unlimited potential. So why is my talk on Google Jamboard, which is a digital tool? Well, I actually pitched this talk pre-COVID because my love of sticky notes over the past year pivoted during grad school when the challenge of working remotely with my colleagues, while I was in London and they were spread across Kitchener, Waterloo, and Stratford, made it challenging to be in a room together. While there are lots of great tools out there, Miro, Mural, Trello, the simplicity of Jamboard, the ease of use, the fact that it's free, familiar, and quite frankly, the fact that it has a limited amount of features makes it the closest, to my opinion, to the experience of using a Post-it in real life. So here's what I'll be walking through in the next 20 minutes or so, and then I will open it up to questions and discussion following the session on the PSE Web Zoom channel for anyone who may be attending the conference in real time. If you're viewing this recording after the fact, please feel free to reach out via Twitter, LinkedIn, or email. I'd be happy to connect. So first, I'll be starting with my why, what brought me to use Jamboard in the first place. Next, I'll be going over the framework for design sprints and games to help you reimagine the projects you're working on right now in higher ed. After that, I'll show you a few use cases of how Jamboard collaboration have helped me move my own work forward. And last but not least, we'll plan that jam. I'll recap the steps you need to follow to host your upcoming project using Jamboards. So for anyone unfamiliar with Jamboard, I'll quickly walk you through the main features. It's part of the Google suite of products, so that means that people who have a Gmail account, who've used Google Docs, will already have access. And once again, I just want to mention that Mural and Miro are great, but often if you're working with people who have any sort of aversion to new technology, a Google product is really a safe bet. Like all Google products, there's also the option to share links with anyone who can collaborate and edit, and it's really user-friendly. Or if the information is sensitive, you can also limit access to specific users by email. So you can access the software itself on any laptop or desktop. But they also have a very robust app available on iOS and Android that allows people to contribute in real time. So for my upcoming screenshots, I'll be sharing the view from the desktop app. But when you first go to the Jamboard website, what you'll see is a little plus arrow at the bottom right corner. So by clicking on that little orange plus, it allows you to create a new jam and you're off to the races. So you can rename the Jamboard at the top of the board, and all the features you need to use on a whiteboard are located on the left menu. There's a pen and highlighter tool, an eraser, a cursor, a selection tool, the post-it tool, the most important tool of all, in my opinion, and an image tool and laser pointer. I'll just switch over to the live site, and you can see here, the pen tool gives you options in terms of colors. The eraser tool allows you to erase things if you made mistakes. The select tool allows you to easily reposition and resize the post-its. And the post-it tool allows you to create new notes. Like most Google tools, you can have many collaborators in a jam at once, and you can all be generating sticky notes at the same time. So in some ways, this also improves upon the post-it because the font is legible and handwriting isn't a giveaway. So you have increased anonymity if you're looking to collect ideas from multiple people who might be a little bit shy about sharing their contributions. One of the greatest strengths of the sticky note as a tool is to seek out the ideas of introverts and quiet thinkers who may not feel inclined to share their ideas in a room full of people. Jamboard allows them to submit their ideas and for all ideas to be seen equally. So everyone gets the same yellow square. It's the message over the medium or even the person delivering it. And while this is really great for remote work, I found that when working on a project in grad school, actually, where we were developing a new app, we ended up in the room on our laptops, all working on Jamboard instead of using the whiteboards around us, because the advantage of Jamboard is also that you can digitally capture all of those thoughts. So no more manually typing in all of those post-it notes or feeling heartbroken if you misplaced one at the end of the day that had a really great idea on it. In a post-COVID remote work, socially distant world, this is especially useful as your contributors can be in different locations. And if they have different hours of work due to time zone or childcare requirements, you can work asynchronously. It allows people to pop in at a time that's convenient for them, or you can work on a jam while in a Zoom to come together and discuss some of these themes that you're seeing. In terms of teamwork, when you're trying to solve a complex problem, it also allows parties that are involved to come together virtually and visualize the whole problem. And it also makes it glaringly clear if there's an omission. So this is crucial when you're working towards building a shared goal or common vision for a project. So, it's a really great opportunity to smash down those silos that exist in higher ed. So this brings me to my next section, where I want to highlight a couple of incredible books that have easy to implement step-by-step guides for facilitating problem-solving sessions. So in addition to my sticky note obsession, I also have a bit of a book problem, or make that like a growth mindset, lifelong learning problem. During my first week of grad school, Waterloo hosted a boot camp on UX design and working in teams. And my professors, Leonard Knack and Linda Carson, mentioned a few really, really great titles that have reshaped the way that I work, and also contributed to a very large Amazon invoice in September. So the first book, Sprint, right here, it's awesome, is by Jake Knapp. And anyone familiar with design thinking framework, lots of the terms he uses might be familiar, but what's really great about this book is that he summarizes the whole process in 5 easy steps for creating a project, or more specifically, solving big problems at your institution that you might be facing. So those 5 steps are mapping, sketching, deciding, prototyping, and testing. So I'll walk through what that looks like. As an example, in a department that I've worked, someone came to me with the following statement saying, we need a new brochure to highlight our undergraduate art programs. The design sprint model encourages you to embrace the problem, not the solution. So here the problem would really be highlighting undergraduate art programs. The proposed solution of brochures might be the best. It's certainly perceived as the best, but we really want to test that assumption and instead kind of fall in love with the problem instead of the solution. So using the design sprint framework, on day one, you would make a map and choose a target. So on Google Jamboard, this could look like asking your stakeholders to define the problem, ask about the audience. And this could look like a student journey map. For step two, you want to work together to sketch out competing solutions. And divergent thinking is really important here. You're looking for lots of different ideas, as many as you can come up with. There are no bad ideas. Set a time limit and a minimum number of ideas, but not a maximum. Don't worry about duplicates at this point. You're trying to generate lots and lots of ideas, and you can think about refining them and converging those ideas later on. So here we saw, a brochure, a postcard, a view book, an internship video series, GIFs, TikToks, a new website. What we did is we took that initial concern, that initial problem, and we reframed it as a how might we statement. So how might we engage with our students when most of their art making is happening at home right now due to COVID. So we, sourced all of those ideas, but then we kept step three in mind, which was deciding, right? So for step three, everyone is issued 3 dots, and they get to dot vote for their favorite option. They can use all of their dots on one choice, or they can spread them out and use them on various ideas. So on Jamboard, you can use the marker tool for this feature. And it becomes really clear which idea is actually the most valued by the group. And it's not just the person who's spoken the loudest or the person who ranks highest in the meeting who gets to make that decision. It's really the strong idea that wins out. In step 4, you build a prototype. So instead of building a full website, you could sketch some wireframes, build a mood board. Instead of a high production video series, you could do 1 or 2 quick cell phone videos as an example. That way, when you're showing it to your stakeholders, when you're showing it to your audience, you're able to test that out without investing a lot of time, energy, and resources. So for step 5, you test those prototypes with your target customer audience and then integrate their feedback into any revisions before investing the time, energy, and resources into developing the fully fleshed out product. So this has been like a really, really simplified version of the sprint, but the book is fabulous, and their website is just thesprintbook.com, and it has lots of great resources, guides that you can use to host your own sprint. You could even post your prototype on Jamboard, really, and ask your stakeholders to provide feedback using the sticky notes on that jam. It's a robust framework, and while it might not be operationally feasible to solve every higher ed problem using this approach, for big projects like web redesigns or social strategy around a new webinar series, for example, it's an exceptional framework to make sure you've explored all your options, focused in on the right ones, and really selected options that best align with your goals. It also creates junctures for feedback so that you can improve along the way. The next book that I love and would highly recommend is Game Storming. It outlines classic facilitation games like card sorting, dot voting that we just saw, but also things like empathy mapping. It gives a discrete time limit for each game and a use case for each one of them. And it provides dozens and dozens of game options to move your team closer towards really understanding the root of your problem instead of just jumping to suggested solutions. So in higher ed, we're often guilty of implementing the same plan year over year and not stopping and asking, is this really still working for us? Why did we originally decide to roll out the project in this way? Is this what our audience wants? So actively facilitated activities in Game Storming invite you to smash those assumptions and explore your current practices with curiosity, with empathy, and with innovation. So while these activities are originally designed for in-person, you'll see like the book cover really has people in front of a whiteboard with Post-its on it. The majority of these games translate really seamlessly to an online platform like Jamboard. So next, I'm going to talk about a few different cases where Jamboard could be used at work, drawing from my own experiences, both myself and what I've witnessed with really great colleagues. So my colleague Day is the manager of undergraduate recruitment at Western, and she's overall just an impressive woman who is the queen of getting stuff done with multiple stakeholders who have competing priorities. And this tweet was actually the impetus for me putting together this session today. She led an awesome in-person sticky note session with colleagues. There were about 30 people there from different units across campus and students, and her goal was to create a coordinated calendar to better serve the future students, which is really a huge and ambitious goal. But look at how incredible this collaboration is. It's easy to see which months are too heavy, which events could benefit from a move, and how resources and people can best work together instead of competing for the same resources and audiences. But as soon as I saw this, all I could think was, oh my goodness, this needs to be on Jamboard. Why? Well, it's almost impossible, even in pre-COVID days, to get 30 people together in a room from different units. And it's even more tricky when colleagues and parents are now working from home while homeschooling. People are in competing Zooms, people are busy. So all of these events needed to also be transcribed into a digital format after the meeting occurred. So what happens if you lose a post-it? So as an alternative, Jamboard could easily replicate this model and solve lots of those challenges. And you can create an unlimited amount of linked boards, so you don't need to worry about running out of space or whiteboards or flip charts. As another example, in my role as president for the Professional Managerial Association at Western, our executive hosts an annual retreat where we plan professional development sessions, events, and ways to support over 1,200 professionals and managers at Western. We're also the umbrella for 6 different committees that each have a different mandate. So the best way for us to visualize what our priorities are, where we're getting stuck, and where there are opportunities to grow is to spend a day covered in Post-its, game storming, dot voting, and prioritizing. But next year I would absolutely use Jamboard instead, especially for one of my favorite exercises, which is actually pick charting. So pick charting is also referred to as the impact effort matrix. So you'll see on the left side, there is an axis that says impact. So how impactful is this project? Is it going to have a great impact within your community or your organization or your department? And then the other axis talks about how much effort you're putting in. So we asked our committee members to list every single event we had on the go, every project, and then rank them, organize them in the various quadrants based on the impact they had for our members and the amount of effort they took to execute. Then we placed the words pick in the 4 quadrants. So the first quadrant, if they are low impact and low effort, well, they're possible. But if they're low impact, do you even want to do them? If they're low effort and high impact, implement them. They're going to be your quick wins. You want to get those done as quickly as possible. If they're high effort and high impact, they will be a challenge to implement. So you may want to ask for help or additional resources from your team, or alternately, you might want to challenge the fact that they need to be implemented if they are taking up too much effort and too much resources. And last but not least, the last quadrant K stands for kill. If they're high effort, low impact, these projects need to be taken off your plate. They're not doing you any service. So now that I've gone over a few case studies and uses for Jamboard, I want to equip you with the keys to return to your team with the steps you need to plan your own jam. So in the words of the great Brené Brown, clear is kind. It's really important to explain the process when you get started, set parameters and a time limit. You also want to consider doing a show and tell. If it's your first jam, if you have people who are not super comfortable with technology, host a live Zoom and screen share so that you can show them how easy it is to create a sticky note, move them around, or dot vote. And last but not least, you want to follow up once they put in the work. They want to see that their time and energy led to a tangible outcome. So it's really important to close that loop. So here's an example. I'd sent out an email asking them to follow the link to the jam that I've set up and contribute at least 5 ideas via sticky note by Tuesday. And then on the following day, I'd set up a Zoom to discuss and dot vote and select the winning idea. Then we prototype those versions before the launch and share it with our stakeholders and maybe some students to get feedback before we launch the final product. So you can even use Jamboard to get your team to list out all the tasks related to a project. And here we've kind of just put them all over. There's no particular order. But then what you can do is organize the tasks on a rough, low-tech timeline Gantt chart in sequential order, and you can put together a work-back timeline. So this really helps you understand, especially when multiple people from different units are working on a project, why it's so important for them to get their task done before the next one and how that impacts everyone on the team. You can even get the involved parties to claim ownership of each step by tacking on their name by the steps that they own. So the possibilities are really endless, and Jamboard allows you to export your jams as PDFs or as images for those wanting a hard copy of the output as well. So now as I close, my challenge to you is to go back to your team, choose a project, and Jamboard it. So identify a strategic problem that your institution is facing, frame it as a question, and brainstorm possibilities to solve it. And I'd encourage you to feel free to reach out if you have questions or comments, or even just to tell me how it went. I'd love to hear from you. So thank you for being a captive audience. Take care, and please don't hesitate to reach out if you have any questions or want to share experiences and stories about your own jams. Thanks, and take care.